traveller rode slowly across the meadows of Connaught, heading west toward the sea on a journey that would be like none other in his life. The evening was peaceful enough. From the hedgerows drifted the scent of honey, suckle and bramble rose. On the grass beneath the horses' hoofs, a carpet of daisies winked white in the twilight. Ahead lay a forest of oak and ash, the tree trunks swathed in ground mist, and in the distance loomed the blue flanks of the Connemara Mountains. The moon rose, a silver sickle, and the darkness deepened. Still the traveller plodded on, hearing only the sigh of the wind in the grasses and the creaking of his saddle. But as he neared the trees, he reined in, for other sounds floated on the air. Harp strings issued a shimmer. Of notes, flutes, described liquid, shining runs, and through the music sounded the ringing of belled bridles, heralding the approach of a great company. A moment later, a splendid column rode out of the forest, 70 gold-clad knights mounted on white horses that were shod in gold and hung with golden bells. Among them was a bevy of women, princesses all it seemed by their dress. They inclined their graceful necks when they saw the traveller, and out of gleaming eyes gave him a clear, severe, wild look that made his heart contract with longing. In and out of the mist, the strangers wound, now visible, now not, of the earth and yet not of it. They moved in a nimbus of possession, he had been given a glimpse of a race of beings, human in form, and more than human in power, that once thronged the fringes of the mortal world, and he was among the last of mortals to see such a sight, which is why his fellows envied him in the traveller's time. The fairies had begun to retreat from humankind. His was an era when fields were claimed from the green forests that mantled the globe, when peddlers' tracks and traders' highways reached into remote corners of the earth, when villages and cities arose in the wilderness. As the natural world was tamed, the fairies it sheltered became even more elusive strangers, yet they were not always thus. Once, at the dreaming dawn of history, before the world was categorized and regulated by mortal minds, before solid boundaries formed between the mortal world and any other, fairies roamed freely among men, and the two races knew each other well. Yet the knowing was never straightforward, and the adventures that mortals and fairies had together were fraught with uncertainty, for fairies and humans were alien to each other. Humans were uneasy at this time, small creatures on a vast, wild planet. They set out to create a reassuring orderliness, to define themselves and the creatures around them, to structure countries and kingdoms, to establish hierarchies among themselves, so that each would know his place and all would know the patterns that prevented anarchy. The fairy nation, in contrast, was essentially fluid and ambiguous, marked by caprice. Fairies existed in human form, sometimes splendid and sometimes grotesque, but if they desired, fairies could also assume the shapes of deer or falcons, flames or flowers or jewels. At times, they cloaked themselves in invisibility. Although they lived on a plane that was linked to the physical world that humans knew, their realm was endowed with additional dimensions. Their kingdoms appeared and disappeared between one blink of the eye and the next, in a way that could only disturb humans. It was as if a full, complex and inexplicable life went busily on, unseen among the mortals' precariously maintained civilizations. Fairies naturally inspired speculation. Ever curious, ever eager to name and define, mortals recorded their glimpses of them in songs and tales and poems. Naming came first, for the name of a thing was charged, as it is in some ways even now, with the essence of that thing. To know a name gave the knower some measure of control over the thing it named. Like all else about fairies, the sources of their names were ambiguous. The words for fairy in Spain and in Italy were fada and fata, respectively, and these seem to have been derived from the Latin fatum or essence were solitary fairies, descendants of the spirits who at the beginning of time ensouled all nature. They were guardians of tree and field, of forest pool and mountain stream, although they shared in some powers of fairy, such as the ability to become invisible or to appear in various shapes. Solitary fairies were wild creatures, and their meetings with mortals were relatively rare compared with those of their grand relatives. The presence of a solitary fairy was most often announced, not by a direct sighting, but by evidence of the creature's activity, the bending of grass as a fairy passed invisibly over it, soughing sounds in tree branches, glittering frost patterns etched on window panes. The aristocracy of fairy was a different matter, known as trooping fairies. These beings were descended, it was popularly thought, from ancient vanquished gods. They were a powerful race who dwelled in kingdoms underground or across the deepest seas. To mortals, they were objects of infinite desire and sometimes infinite fear. The Alfar of Scandinavia were believed to be divided into good and bad branches, the Leosulfar or light elves, who were earth dwellers, and the Dogalfar or dark elves, whose kingdoms were beneath the ground. The Scots made the same distinction. Their fairy bands were called the Seelie or Blessed, Court and the Unseelie Court, the latter often being thought of as the vengeful ghosts of dead mortals. No such division was made in Wales or Ireland. There, the trooping fairies, companies like the one the traveller had seen in the meadows of Connaught, were taken as a whole in all their complex manifestations. In Wales they were called the Tylwyth Teg, the Fair Family. In Ireland they were known as the Dainside, the dwellers of the fairy mounds, for it was under those softly swelling grassy knolls that many of their palaces were hidden. Ireland, in fact, provides the most complete accounts of the trooping fairies and their kind. Irish tales and songs trace the history of these fairies back thousands of years, to a time before the boundaries between their world and the mortal one became dangerous to cross, before mortals grew to fear entrapment in the lands of the fairies, and before the love that could exist between mortal and fairy turned to hopeless yearning. At that time the island had not yet been completely formed and defined. Its hills and lakes and streams were still without names and identities, but mortals were present in number. According to the histories, Ireland had been settled by a people called the Firbolg, who were beginning to tame the rich wilderness. On the first day of May one year, the sky to the north of the island was darkened by a cloud that spread across the rolling hills and blotted out the sun. It gathered around the peaks of the mountain of Conmany Rain, in the very heart of Ireland, and hung in the air for 3 days. When the mist thinned and drifted out to sea, troops of glittering warriors wound in columns down the mountain, drove away the people of the Firbolg, and took the island for themselves. The fairy warriors had come from enchanted islands at the top of the world, and impenetrable to most mortals. That was the beginning of the retreat of the Tuatha, and the time when they gained the name Dian's Side. But their final disappearance would not come for hundreds and hundreds of years. Meanwhile, these heroic beings pursued their wars and loves, generally unseen by the humans who had conquered them. During these centuries, fairy and mortal, though separated, were bound in a network of needs and desires, linked by the world of stream and sea, of leaf and tree and field. The two races reached out to each other in defiance of their alien natures. Again and again, in the comradeship of arms or in the bright fires of love, the beings of fairy ventured into the mortal world. Again and again, mortals set out on journeys that carried them unknowing across the boundaries of fairy, and their adventures were curious indeed. Okay, this picture here is the High King of the Tuatha, heroic fairies of Ireland's distant past. He was the bearer of many titles and the source of many legends. He was styled the father of all, as well as Lord of Knowledge and son of all the sciences. His chief title, Dagda, meant the good God. For the sea-girt Irish, each ocean voyage was uncertain. The waters of the Irish Sea and the North Atlantic were speckled with strange and shifting islands, as the Irish Imrama voyage tales record. Adventurers told of sighting such islands as one of cat-headed men and another of men with dogs' heads, one with a fountain that yielded milk, ale and wine, one of giant horses, and one that turned everything cast on one side white and anything cast on the other black. It was hard to tell in those days whether a sea voyage would go on in a normal and eventful way, or whether the fierce wind and tides of the north would drive the little boats off course and across an invisible barrier into the realms of fairy, where adventures would begin as they did for a prince named Teague. His story was this. Teague was the heir of an early lord of Munster, in the west of Ireland, and he took to the sea on a voyage of rescue and revenge. A marauder named Cathman, with a fleet of 9 ships, had invaded Teague's lands, laid waste the fields, burned the villages and departed for his own stronghold, an island off the coast of Spain, taking as captives Teague's wife, Levan, and 2 of his brothers. Teague was left with 40 warriors, 1 captive from Cathman's band, and a fierce determination to deliver his family. He caused a curragh, a stout ship, to be built. It had strong masts and broad-bladed oars, and the frame was covered, the story says, with hard red leather made from the hides of 40 oxen. On a bitter morning in March, they launched the little ship at Kerry Head, sliding her over the pebbles of the shore and into the grip of cresting seas. With their oars flashing, the Irishmen drove forward into wind and icy rain, and it was not long before Teague and his 40 warriors and the captain The sea swelled high above the masts in roaring mountains that smashed icy torrents across the bow. Gasping under the onslaught, the men pulled at their oars with cold, stiffened fingers. As Teague shouted encouragement, they brought the boat around into the wind and held her there safely throughout the day and the screaming night that followed. Morning came at last, and the gale died. The sun rose, scattering diamonds across the surface of the sea. The men raised the currag's sails and headed west, and the sun played on their backs as they rested. Soon they saw in the distance a coastline. They steered for it, and at length the curragh slid quietly into an estuary of green water, so clear that the voyagers could see the silvery sands of the bottom and watch the darting of the scarlet salmon that played there. The shore on either side was fringed with trees, and from their midst poured the carols of unknown birds. Teague and his men made for shore and together pulled the curragh up to dry on the shingle. Then they entered the wood. The travellers knew at once that this was no ordinary place. In Munster, spring had just begun. The earth was bare and hard there, and the trees were black. Here, however, the trees were thick with leaves and heavy with fruit. Their branches swayed gently, although no wind stirred, and they seemed to listen as the intruders passed beneath them. All were trees sacred to the Irish from ancient times, so revered that anyone who cut them might forfeit his life. Some were venerable and mighty oaks, worshipped since time began and sentient still. Oaks wailed when they were cut. Apple trees, fertile guardians of immortality, grew in abundance, laden with scarlet globes, and among them stood many hazel trees, heavy with the clusters of yellow nuts that in Ireland sometimes bestow all the world's wisdom on the mortal lucky enough to eat them. After the men had walked some little distance, the wood thinned and became sunny again and park-like. Then the travellers found themselves at the verge of the wood, looking into the country that it guarded. They laughed and exclaimed at the sight that met their eyes. Something out to the rim of the sky was a wide, smooth plain, cloaked in the green and white of flowering clover. Breaking the expanse were three grassy hills, each guarded by a high-walled palace. The men set out for the nearest one. At its marble ramparts they met a blithe and shining lady. She seemed to expect the travellers and to trust them, for she called Teague by name and sent him with his men to the hill beyond, where the scene was repeated. The travellers came to the third of the hills, and, as they had been instructed, passed through the mighty arch gate of the castle there and entered the courtyard. At its centre grew a wide-spreading apple tree, its branches white with blossoms and also laden with fruit. From among the white blossom drifted a woman like a flower, her hair resembling silvered petals. She regarded the mortals with a calm gaze and said Teague's name. Care fell from him at the sound of her voice, and he listened with a calm that matched her own as she told these things. She said that she was a daughter called Cleodna, fair hair, of the Tuatha de Danann, and that the island was her own. She said that the fruit of her apple tree was of such power that mortals who ate it would never hunger and would always be drawn to her lands. And she warned them that when a day passed in her realm, which seemed but a day, a year passed in the mortal world, so that Teague was reminded of the quest he had undertaken. Then the fairy told Teague that she would give 3 gifts to aid him on his quest. The first was a guide to the place of battle. The guide comprised 3 birds. She summoned from the branches of the apple tree, one blue with a crimson head, one scarlet with a head of green, and one of many colours whose head shone gold. The second gift the fairy gave was an emerald chalice. It would guard Teague's life as long as he kept it by him, she said. And the last gift was this. She told Teague what the manner of his death would finally be, so he knew that the time for it had not yet come. She told him too that she herself would be with him on his last day, on the banks of the Boyne River, when a wild hart would gore and kill him. After she had spoken those 2, the mortal and the fairy smiled gravely at each other, for such was the fair hare's power that she had armoured Teague against fear, although the men with him shuffled anxiously and whispered among themselves. But they followed Teague willingly when he left the court, and with the fairy beside him, crossed the flowering plain again and made his way through the enchanted wood to the Curragh. The water whispered around the ship's bow as it headed down the estuary. High above the masts, the 3 birds rode the bright air and sang without cease. On the bank stood the fairy, arrow straight and star bright. She neither moved nor spoke again, but she watched Teague steadily. When the Curragh reached open water and gathered speed, Teague turned to look a last time and thus saw the sheet of mist that rose from the water at the island shore and crept swiftly up the banks, curling around the trees and around the figure of the fairy, until at last it blanketed even the tops of the tallest oaks. The mist eventually dispersed into coiling white ribbons drifting on the water's surface. Then even these ribbons disappeared, and where the island had been was only empty sea, and the red-sided Curragh, her canvas billowing with fairy wind, sailed southward. Above her masts, the 3 birds flashed and tumbled and sang their dancing harmonies. In the boat, the men of Munster lay entranced. They awoke only when the singing ceased and the birds had become 3 bright specks in the northern sky, heading for home. At once, the Curragh grated on a beach, her sails slack. The travellers were at the edge of a narrow lock that pierced the shore of the harsh, pine-covered country. Across the waters of the loch were the ramparts of a wooden stronghold. From its tower hung the pennon of the pirate Cathman, abductor of Teague's wife and enslaver of his brothers. The Munster men had arrived at the place of battle. Leaving his company to guard the Curragh, Teague armed himself and set out to reconnoitre. As he walked along the sand, he heard his name called softly across the water. A ragged ferryman, pulling hard at the oars of a shabby boat, approached and beached his craft. It was Teague's brother, Owen, brought to this humble pass after a year of captivity under Cathman. Owen's news was good. Teague's wife was safe, but a prisoner, and Cathman meant soon to take her for his own, having been delayed only by her pleading. Teague had arrived in the time of conspiracy. his men had drunk deep after their feasting. It was a savage battle, and in the end the Irish put the castle to the torch. Amid the flickering light of the flames and crowds of sweating, shouting men, Teague and Cathman fought alone, and the monsterman took blow after blow from the pirate until he was driven to his knees. He carried the Fairies' emerald talisman, however, and it gave him the strength to rise once more and strike his enemy's head from his shoulders. Teague bore 30 wounds, but he did not die. His death came many years later, long after Teague and his wife and brothers had returned to Ireland. He lived in peace until the day that a white hart attacked him on the banks of the Boyne, and the maiden from the enchanted isle appeared before him once again, as she had promised years before. In none of their tellings of the venture could Teague or his men ever identify the point on the ocean where they had crossed the borders of their own world and entered the realm of Fairy. They did not know. The border of the other world were never shifting and transitory. It was significant, however, that the moment of crossing came when the currach was adrift, off course and travelling in no direction that could be defined. It was significant, too, that the first event of the crossing was a sample of chaos in the shape of a storm. The fairy world was in some ways the antithesis of the world of mortals, and things of fairy had a natural affinity for the indeterminate and the undefinable. To relax the mortal grasp of order was to invite passage between the two worlds. Okay, I am going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed that. This has been Kate at the Library of Whispers saying I shall see